And I think that's the 3.0 now, which is like, is the next Urban Outfitters created by a group of creators.
And I think the reason this is happening is because we are all in a race to diversify our income streams away from advertising. Like, the reality is, our income, and many of us as creators, our income relies on our ability to sit down and talk to a camera, edit it together. But, that can have a shelf life to it, or things can happen in your life that you can't do that anymore. So you have to have other revenue streams available to you when potentially this ends.
What is up, everyone? This is episode 14, and today we are talking the business side of Colin and Samir. And Colin and Samir have absolutely blown up in the past year. I mean, I see them referenced everywhere, and the reason being is they've become your favorite creator. Did I do that right? What I mean is, if you're a top YouTuber, if you're a top podcaster, if you're a big creator or any creator, you watch these guys to understand where everything is going. You watch them to understand what's the deal with NFTs. What are different revenue streams I can pursue? You see them with interviews with top creators like MKBHD and Mr. Beast. And so that made this interview really interesting because to date, we've really focused on, what are people's story? How did they get to where they are today? And then what's next? This interview is all about what's next. Where is the creator economy going? Which I think is a very difficult question to answer, but these two live it and breathe it every single day. But before we jump back in, please subscribe to Colin and Samir's channel and subscribe to yours truly. And don't be afraid to give me a 5-star review. I would very much appreciate it. Let's get back into the episode. You guys made a bold claim in your last video that influencers are over, they're done, they're gone, the future is here. What is the future?
So I think, that comment that influencers are over, kind of suggestive of the fact that we're all creators now, and creators means a lot more than just creating content. I think what we're starting to see is that people who are uploading video and building audiences on the internet are creating things like businesses and brands that have longevity and communities. So I think that sentiment was more so that notion of just like an influencer is over, and it's so much wider and so much more all-encompassing now today to be a creator.
I think when a lot of people hear the term influencer, there's a stereotype around it, right? That you think of someone on a beach in Bali just taking a photo and getting paid millions for that photo.
Correct.
That it's potentially work that does not come with talent or skill. And so I think influencers are over sort of shatters that stereotype a little bit. When you look now at what creators are doing across the board, we're all small business owners.
Right.
And our businesses are so multifaceted. So it was a good title, a good hook to get us into that episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was instant clickbait. I clicked on it. I wanted to know why influencers are done. Yeah, I have this perception of influencers. I even hate the word. I hate to say that I work in influencer marketing because people are like, oh, do you hawk tummy tea on the internet? And Sure. It's like, no. But even the idea of influencers is a funny one because I was thinking about it recently where if I wanted to do an integration with you guys, and maybe that'll happen. We know we've had this discussions before.
You've been teasing this for years. So
we're here.
You guys, so you keep on coming on my podcast. For the audience, this is the second time we recorded this, so they are very nice to do this for the second time. I completely fucked up the first one. So where was I? Okay, if I were to partner with you guys, right, it's just you and me, and we're partnering. But if I were to partner and, let's say, do a TV commercial, like a true influencer relationship is almost closer to, let's say, like what Nike did with Michael Jordan. They partner with Michael Jordan. They have to hire an agency to think of that, a production agency, a media buying agency, a creative agency. There's a lot of middlemen in between. Whereas if you and I wanted to work together, it is a true one-to-one connection, if you get what I'm saying. So even like the term influencer, even just the narrow confines of influencer marketing, I think never gave creators enough credit.
Totally. I really do think that the term creator, it suggests like this compulsion and this desire and this expertise at just creating beyond, media. I mean, in that episode, we talked to Shelby Church about the fact that she just bought an Airbnb in Palm Springs she bought a house in Palm Springs and is turning it into this branded Airbnb experience. Start to realize that she's creating a space and creating an experience, and media is the thing that accelerates that and makes it unique and makes it, very much Shelby's experience. But I get excited about the concept of, creators moving into hospitality, or what we've seen recently, creators moving into food and beverage. Even with Emma Chamberlain's recent pop-up shop here in LA, it's like Chamberlain Coffee is something she's created, and she is a creator in the sense that she's making a brand and experience for people.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's start with you guys. What's the elevator pitch for everyone who hears this podcast knows who you guys are, but I'm going to make you do it anyway. How would you describe like what Colin and Samir is?
For us, we like to lean on our mission statement to help us define that, which is to educate and empower the next generation of creators. And I think that first word, educate, encompasses a lot of what we do. Everything is through an educational lens. The show that we produce on YouTube, the Colin and Samir show, it's built to educate. It's built to inform and bring our observations of what's happening in the creator economy with some takeaways and analysis that whether you're a creator yourself or you're working with creators, you're more educated about the space and can actually navigate it better if you consume the content. Now, we just also launched a newsletter, which is a bit more industry focused, but it's to educate both the creators as well as people in the industry about our perspective, the creator's perspective on the news that we're hearing in the space. So we feel like being able to educate and being educators ourselves is kind of where we lie in the industry.
We often say that we're writing the textbook for the creator economy in real time. So we look at everything that we do as curriculum, whether it's our Published Press newsletter or one of our videos on our YouTube channel. It's just developing curriculum around the creator economy and giving people roadmaps, sometimes based off of other creators and what they're doing, so that the next generation of creators can look at what's currently happening and say, oh, maybe I'll base my career off of what this creator's doing, or a mix of what all these creators are doing.
And how long did it take you to get to that value prop?
Well, to get to where we are today, it's taken over a decade. To get to the value prop, I think it took us about 4 years, to be honest. But it was a constant evolution. Like this iteration of Colin and Samir started about 4 years ago. And I think we were trying to find our path about who we were, what we wanted to do. As creators, there's this interesting dance that you play between what you want to make, what the algorithm wants, and what your audience wants to see. And you have to make sure all three of those things hit. And I think a lot of creators start with what they want to make. And then over time, they learn what the algorithm wants and what the audience wants as well. And so you're playing a dance between those three things. And I think what we wanted to make 4 years ago was content like we're making today, but there wasn't an audience for it. And so over time, like this content that we're making where we're talking about the creator economy, it's just so happened that the timing is such that both the audience wants it and the algorithm is responding to what we're making as well. And so we tried a bunch of different iterations of this, between vlogs, between, podcasts like we're doing now, more video essay style content. And right now, the right match has happened between those three. And a lot of that is based on 4 years of iterating and getting down to this value prop of who we are.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like 2 years ago or a year ago, really, we couldn't even have a company based off of covering the creator economy. Like so much has changed in the past year. Some people who watch us have called us the ESPN for creators. And I feel like that is pretty representative of what we're doing. But even that, it's so early to have that type of organization, right? Like for how early this space is and how much it's changing every day, like that audience, we think will grow over time of people who are really interested in learning about what's happening with creators.
Like we didn't even use the word creator economy a year ago. And like, it's just I've noticed this tidal shift in the last year where just studying the creator economy is just a completely new phenomenon that whether you're a creator or not, you're infatuated with how these entrepreneurs are just kind of like sidestepping the normal trajectory. And that's been kind of a narrative on this podcast that I've accidentally fallen into, where we talk to a lot of different people, whether it's we talked to Michael Gruen last episode, Joe Pompliano, like these people who normally would have to go through, whether it was Michael would have to work in a mailroom at CAA to eventually get to the point where he can now represent, Josh Richards or the other people. Or Joe Pomp, I mean, if he wanted to be the next Darren Ravel, you got to follow Darren Ravel around for, 4 years, 5 years, and then maybe you get a shot. And just interesting how people's interests are just so maligned that this is something they actually really care about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I think even when you really think about the concept of being able to produce something and distribute it, when we first started, like when I was in college, if we wanted to do that, you had to find your way into a TV network or a radio station to like make something and put it through the pipes, right? So I think even that notion of our ability, if we want to make a documentary, we can make a documentary and no one can stop us. And I think that's a really interesting thing that happened. And probably over the past year, I think the differentiation between like traditional media and digital media, it was like shattered by the pandemic. When Hollywood shut down and essentially we didn't have content to consume through Hollywood, like I think everyone kind of turned their focus to be like, wait a second, there's like rapid production happening over here, and like the conversation that's happening in my world is happening online because of the speed at which it moves and the fact that people can just make stuff. And for the first time in a long time, there was a global conversation around the pandemic, and we were all experiencing something universal. And Hollywood couldn't move at any sort of speed, or traditional media couldn't move at a speed that could capture that. And so that's where you saw a lot of that happening on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, where like the world was captivated by what was happening through creators' eyes and through the creator lens. And I think that legitimized creators to a point of being like, okay, this is now just accepted as media.
So we accelerated, maybe let's call it 3 or 4 years in the span of just COVID. But now a kid now wants to be a YouTube creator. Everybody wants to be a YouTuber. It is more popular than ever before. And there's this episode where you guys film with Eric, and he's one who's an exception to this rule, but there's a perception now where it's virtually impossible to break into YouTube. If you want to break into YouTube, don't even try. It's too cluttered. You can't do it. It's hard. It's easier to make the NBA than it is to become a YouTuber. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I think you have to define what success looks like for you on YouTube, right? Because I don't think anyone, when they sit down and think about like, I want to be a successful YouTuber, is imagining even like the scale that Colin and I are at. Like, I don't think people understood that you could have a whole business based on where we're at. I think you imagine I need to have millions and millions of subscribers and millions of views per episode to actually run a business and to be a full-time creator. So I think if the goal is, hey, I love YouTube, I want to make a living doing YouTube, I don't think that's impossible. I think what's challenging is if you say, I want to be as big as Mr. Beast, or even I want to be as big as some of these other creators. I think Eric has showed us that it is possible, but I think you just have to define your success. Like, you can have a very successful, sustainable business having 100,000 subs or even 10,000 people watching every video. So I think you just have to define, like, what's the business you're building? Is YouTube, is it an advertising business, or are you using YouTube to propel something else, or are you building a community? There's so many different ways to cut it now that I absolutely don't think anyone should be discouraged, but I think everyone should be encouraged to define what success means for them on the platform, because it is completely different for everyone.
I also feel like YouTube is something that creators can graduate to now, and that's become completely accepted and normal, that you'll maybe start off on Instagram or specifically TikTok, and then you'll make the move to YouTube. And I think now with YouTube Shorts, that transition gets even easier. We're seeing a lot of creators upload short form content to YouTube via Shorts, and then all of a sudden they're building pretty significant distribution channels on YouTube that then they can start putting out long form content with a base of people who are ready to watch it. Yeah, and I think that's something totally different, because before YouTube Shorts, there's no way to grow a YouTube channel without that grueling process of putting out long form content for years, potentially. And now with Shorts, like, people are finding success really growing their subscribers. And then if they want to put out a long form series, they can do it.
Totally. I think Shorts is just like the easiest on-ramp for all these TikTok creators, because I'll be interested to know you guys' thoughts on this. But when I think about a creator, when you have TikTok and Twitter and Instagram are almost like the top of the funnel, right? And you're moving people further down the funnel, and YouTube is that next step. Podcast is kind of in that same group. And then if you go further down, you have membership, you have Patreon, you have live events, you have that kind of thing. And so if you're one of these top TikTok creators, you're trying to move from TikTok to YouTube, from YouTube to podcast, from podcast to maybe some sort of membership type option.
Yeah, I think also though, outside of like a transition or an on-ramp for TikTok creators, I think what Colin mentioned is right, that it's actually also just an opportunity for someone to test themselves as a creator, whether or not they've even been on TikTok, right? Like Shorts is just an opportunity to say like, do I have a value prop and do I have an audience for it? Like, do I have creator market fit, as we'll call it? I think Shorts offers that opportunity where it's just like, okay, just let me grab a phone and see if what I'm talking about is interesting to anyone, or what I want to make content about is interesting to anyone. Because I think that's one of the most grueling processes, is trying to figure out what your market fit is on any of these platforms. It's like I mentioned 4 years ago, there was no market for what we were talking about.
So one thing I want to get back to is the business you're building, because you said there's this, I'm seeing it all over the YouTube right now, where I talk to different creators, and they're not creators you would think, but they're making a fuck ton of money on YouTube, but they're monetizing in different ways, where it's not your normal, okay, really bright colors in my thumbnail, I'm playing with slime, and I'm making millions of dollars a year off AdSense. You guys are obviously doing it a different way. How are you guys building a business that's maybe not as reliable as AdSense as those people? And what are the different components of that?
So at first, like most creator businesses, our primary business is advertising. And I think when you're in the advertising business, you have to understand two things really well. One is, who is your audience? Like who are you delivering value to? And for us, we break that into 4 categories. One is aspiring creators. 2 is career creators. So people like Marquez Brownlee, like Mr. Beast, who we found out are in our audience, and then we're able to actually bring them on our show.
No big deal.
Yeah, flex. And then people in the creator industry, so people like yourself, people who are working with creators.
Hey, I'm an aspiring creator. I got a podcast.
So you can be in multiple categories.
You can be in multiple categories, Ian. Yeah, you're in multiple. And then our 4th is non-believers, so people who are not currently all in on the creator economy. And typically people in those first 3 categories use our content to convert non-believers into supporters. And so we have to make things digestible for people who are not currently a part of our world to actually be able to convert them into our world. So when we think about those categories and how we deliver value to them, the second thing you have to know in the advertising business is who else is trying to achieve that same mission. And so there's a lot of companies that are trying, to work with creators and to help them understand their business, to help them understand how they can monetize together, or what their value prop is. And so if we're delivering to those audience groups and we're delivering education to those audience groups and figuring out how to both educate and empower them, who else is doing that? And what's happened is that a lot of those types of advertisers have come on board, with our content, because there's a natural connection there. So an example of one of our advertisers is Jelly Smack. Are you familiar with Jelly Smack?
I'm familiar with the name, and I'm always like, "What the hell is Jelly Smack?" And I've never clicked it. So let's give them a free ad.
Let's give them a quick. All right, let's give them a quick shout out here. But Jelly Smack essentially helps creators syndicate content across platforms. So you're making content on YouTube. They'll take your content, they'll cut it for Facebook, they'll cut it for Snap, they'll cut it for TikTok, and help you monetize across those platforms. So in our show, there's an opportunity essentially to deliver that value prop to the audience, who are aspiring creators and career creators and people in the creator industry who are learning about different ways to monetize and understanding that they are bandwidth strapped, but there are companies out there to help you monetize across other platforms. So it's a natural fit into our world, right?
Right. You are the bridge to creators.
Exactly. We're the bridge for a company like that to creators. And so Number one is always advertising for us. That's like, again, it's most creator businesses work like that. And to do that, you have to understand your audience and then understand who else is looking to deliver the value prop you're delivering to your audience in your space. And then you can build a bridge there. So that's the natural kind of evolution into newsletter, where having a free newsletter now increases our content frequency in a week, right? Where it's like, hey, here's the value prop we deliver on our Monday show. Now we have a Tuesday newsletter that delivers on a very similar value prop and a Friday newsletter that delivers on a very similar value prop in a more scalable fashion that now allows for advertisers also to get in the door there. It's just another bridge, right? So in the advertising business, we have to build essentially multiple bridges to the same audience, all with different, all with different amounts of effort and scalability attached to them.
So that makes you a media conglomerate now, correct?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's use that word.
And then therefore
yes.
you guys are now moguls.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
That's just the main thing we're trying to get across here, is that please refer to us as moguls.
Okay, so you two moguls, you got advertising, you got some AdSense money.
Yep.
What are the other, because you guys are monetized, I mean, you got these classes, you guys are selling fucking NFTs. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with classes. So last year we got into direct to consumer content. And again, we thought about what's our value prop to our audience? It's education. Then the next thing, what's the extension of that value prop? So a year ago, if we were to choose maybe merch, that's not necessarily educating our audience. And our audience is there to get educated. So courses for us, selling courses seemed like the natural first step to go outside of advertising. And that's what we did, was release our first course last year. And that did really pretty well for us. And that's something we're going to continue to double down on towards the end of this year.
So I think when you think about direct to consumer with the creators, the amazing part of it is that your audience is always going to value you at a higher rate than an advertiser. So like the emotional connection of your audience, if you're delivering your value prop, in a compelling fashion to them, they're going to value you higher, which is why apparel works, right? Like an audience member becomes worth $30, $35 in apparel, whereas an audience member in advertising sometimes trades as a part of a CPM in a group of 1,000, right? And so it's a completely different math equation when it comes to direct to consumer. So for example, our course, we've now sold about 800 people have bought the course. It sells at $100. And so you start to realize, like, at 800 people, where else can we monetize at that scale?
I'm trying to do that head math, and I can't believe I'm not going.
$80,000.
They made $80,000. They just did some very simple math in their heads. So
Yeah.
credit for that.
So, but you start to think about that, right? Like at 800 people, where else is who else is valuing that at $80,000? It's only direct to consumer.
Yeah,
And
the
so-
one thing I would say, though, is the emotional connection is one thing I'd highlight. Some creators can't sell merch, right? There's some creators who are really good at mastering the SEO of YouTube, and if they were to come out with a merch, you could write a BuzzFeed article that said, YouTube creator with 4 million views moves 30 t-shirts.
100%. Yeah. But that's the X factor here of like, what are you delivering on? And what Colin and I were mentioning is, like, if your value prop is not community, then merch might not work. So Yes
Right.
Theory is a great example where part of their value prop is community. They're building like a really tight-knit community. Now that community wants to showcase that they're part of the community. How do you do that? Through merch, through apparel. So if your extension is community, then yeah, definitely you can sell merch. But what we realized is a year ago, that wasn't the case for us. Our extension of our value prop was education. So we can sell education. And that's like, now as we're starting to build a community, now we're talking about merchandise. Now there's more community around what we're doing. And so merchandise can make sense to identify with that community. So I think the same theory and concept goes to the NFT. We had to really dig in for months to think about, who are we valuable to in this space, and how do we express that value prop? And how do we actually deliver on that? And what you realize is in the NFT, there's one buyer. So you don't have to explain it to millions and millions of people. You need one buyer, and you need the right buyer, and you need them to understand the value prop correctly. And it's a similar concept in any sort of direct to consumer relationship from creator to audience. It's just like, is this a true extension of my value prop? Is there an emotional connection that I can explain here? And can I deliver on this? And if so, a lot of times those can be successful.
What was that final NFT price? You know, I got to ask.
It was 9.7 ETH, which at the time was around $33,000. It shot up to about 40, and now I think it's back to like.
I haven't looked. I don't have the heart.
I'll tell you.
Don't tell me.
Can I tell you?
Nope, I don't have the heart to look.
You want to cover your ears?
Yep.
It went down to 18,000.
Okay, I heard. That's disappointing.
It's creeping up, guys. We're doing okay. I mean, if you had done the sale Friday, last Friday, you'd be riding this train all the way up.
I know. That would be. We sold the NFT sold on the day that Ethereum was at its highest. So I don't think that was. It just so happened that was the timing. But you know, it would have been better if it was now.
Yeah, and that was an experiment in order to educate our community on the intersection of crypto and creators. Like, that was not by any means a planned revenue play for us. That was like, let's go through this process and show our audience how we did it. What did we consider?
Right.
And then that was just happened to be the byproduct of it.
And the goal was to develop a relationship with, you know, an advisor who could help us dig deeper into the space and go further down the rabbit hole. And that's what's happened. And we have a group now that's awesome.
Yep. Totally agree. And it's a space that, I mean, it's like I have a very basic understanding, and I understand that this is going to be incredibly important to where the creator economy is going. But if you don't live in the crypto world, you kind of see things like BitClout, NFTs, Beeple, and it's very overwhelming at first. So watching you guys go through that kind of emotional journey of minting that NFT on your YouTube channel, I thought about it myself and how much anxiety I would have going in and figuring out, and your little crypto guru who guided you guys through the process. Like, that was exactly how I would want to approach it. So I thought that was a great way to like educate the whole community on what the hell NFTs are.
Yeah, I think a lot of people learn by doing, and then in turn, like, we try and learn by doing and then showcase that. But I think our next iteration in crypto will allow for other people to actually learn by doing as well.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for us about crypto is we initially wanted to cover it because of all of the hype, right? We were like, after Logan Paul sold his Pokemon cards, after Beeple's after Beeple sold his $69 million piece of work, we were like, all right, let's just cover this. But through that process, we sort of were able to put the hype aside and learn about the potential really that it holds. And I think you can like see the light bulb moments kind of go off for us in our videos. And that's why we were like, oh, okay, like we do want crypto advisors because we truly believe in how much it can affect creators moving forward.
Do you guys own Ethereum outside of this NFT? Are we full-time investors?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not financial advice, but yes. Yes.
So one thing I kind of want to finish on this, or this concept is really interesting to me because I think you can juxtapose this with what's going on in creator marketing right now. But you have these levels of creator monetization, where the first was merch. Second, we get into digital products. I think we've covered those two. The third is creator-led brands, which, if you wouldn't mind walking like the audience through that, what does that look like? How is that different from merch and everything else?
I think Chamberlain Coffee is a pretty good example of that. You know, it's not your traditional concept of merchandise. It's not T-shirts. It's coffee, and the opportunity there for Emma is to launch this brand that essentially introduces her audience, which is a young audience, to the routine and the lifestyle of drinking coffee, which is a lifelong thing to do, right? It's something that once you start drinking coffee, you don't typically stop.
So she's indoctrinating the next generation to a coffee addiction, is what you're saying.
We were all heading that way anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
everyone's heading towards a coffee addiction. Yeah,
we
it's inevitable.
We can't put that on her.
It's
the
inevitable.
genie's out of the bottle with that one.
Yeah. It's inevitable. But you know, for her, I think the opportunity to like build a brand that can live beyond Emma Chamberlain, and live after the fact that she's making videos, that's the opportunity with what we're seeing across the board. even with Mr. Beast and Beast Burger and some of these food and beverage plays. I think as we see what we mentioned earlier, what Shelby Church is doing with the Racket Club Resort, which is her first venture into hospitality, buying a house and converting it into a branded, essentially hotel, mini hotel, which she can then turn into, the Racket Club Resort can open up all over the nation. And so what we're starting to see is these brands that can live beyond the video, or beyond the creator's videos, but be amplified and accelerated through that. And I think really the opportunity is for creators to do things that aren't necessarily overtly novel, but the novelty comes from the fact that it's them. It's like the creator, and they have a community attached to them. So, launching a coffee shop, launching a burger chain, launching a hotel, these are industries that have existed in the past.
Coffee mugs.
Yeah. Cody Co with Mean Mugs. And so I think this iteration, what you're starting to feel, I think the opportunity is going to come from creators actually banding together to launch one company. Because I think right now a lot of creators are launching their own individual, businesses, which speak to their communities and a bit beyond. But imagine if you had 10 creators come together to launch the next big apparel brand. I think that's when we get into something that's really interesting, where the next big, retailer could be fully creator led. Is there a marketplace online that's like a fashion retailer that's owned by 10 creators and they're all connecting their audiences into this retailer? I think stuff like that gets really interesting for me. And I think that's the 3.0 now, which is like, is the next Urban Outfitters created by a group of creators?
And I think the reason this is happening is because we are all in a race to diversify our income streams away from advertising. Like, the reality is, our income, and many of us as creators, our income relies on our ability to sit down and talk to a camera, edit it together. But, that can have a shelf life to it, or things can happen in your life that you can't do that anymore. So you have to have other revenue streams available to you when potentially this ends.
Or you could just be tired of sitting in front of a camera.
Sure.
Right?
A lot of people times it's interest, of course. But for any of those reasons, we are all in a race to diversify our income streams.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a really great example is Doug DeMoro's Cars and Bids website.
I learned about it through you guys.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So he reviews cars on his YouTube channel, and then he launched a car auction website called Cars and Bids. Has nothing the name is not Doug DeMoro's car website. It's just Cars and Bids. That's great. So if Doug ever does want to stop, or for some reason he has to stop, potentially he'll have a huge community of people who are already used to using his car auction website.
Right. So then what's 4.0? We just figured out 3.0. What's 4.0?
I think it's what Samir talked about, like creator collectives.
Ooh.
Coming together to launch. There's obviously so much talk around venture capital right now in the creator world. But what does that look like when truly it's just creators who hold that capital, spend that capital, and start to bring up brands and start to launch brands with the distribution already built in.
I also think that creators learning over time that they can be curators is really interesting. When you think about I always think about this, in the NFT space, can't a group of creators make an art gallery, digital art gallery? And so instead of all the creators making the NFTs, can they just curate and storytell around what's in the gallery? Or when you think about the Paul brothers and boxing, the next version of that probably is a boxing promotion company. What they're really good at is figuring out what the storylines are and marketing them properly. So shouldn't they launch a promotion company where they're curating the right events and the right fighters and building media around them? And so I think curation is also a part of 4.0, where it's creators coming together to, even when you think about venture capital, that's essentially curating ideas and thinking about which ones are correct and which ones will fit. So I think that is part of 4.0, where there's two things. I think there's the collective, where we'll see a bunch of creators come together to launch a singular brand and understand that having smaller amounts of equity in that brand can result in a much larger footprint if they do it together. And then in concert with that, the curation effort of saying, I mentioned, couldn't we launch an Urban Outfitters where we're curating the brands, not necessarily making our own apparel, but saying like, let's make a space where we can storytell around what the best stuff is in this industry, or how to storytell to our audience, but other people can do the work of creating the goods.
Right. And full circle. I mean, these people are clearly more than influencers.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're talking about literally launching creator collectives, launching the next Urban Outfitters. This is very far from a sunny beach in the Bahamas promoting tummy tea.
Yeah, but hopefully it all leads to a sunny beach in the Bahamas. That's what we're all doing this for.
That's what we're all doing this for. All right, everyone, that is the episode. Before I leave you, please make sure to rate, subscribe, do all the things. They all mean a ton. Thank you.